Wow, 5:30 on a Friday. Thank you for staying. Massive appreciate it. So I'm Avi. I'm a medical doctor by background, an associate partner at IBM in their healthcare technology division, also their clinical safety lead. And I'm also the co-founder of Doctorpreneurs, which is a non-profit organization and community for medical innovators and entrepreneurs. So I'm going to take you back to 2012. I was a junior doctor working in a busy hospital trust in London on the intensive care unit, so dealing with the sickest patients in the hospital. And we just finished the ward round that day, and after every ward round, it was common for the junior doctor, which was me, to order the range of investigations for the patients who we were looking after, including scans, diagnostic tests, and so forth. And one particular patient we were looking after was a lady who was admitted, who was very sick and intubated, being treated for a very severe bacterial infection. So really, really unwell. And we were checking, as we do for many patients. She'd had a nasogastric tube inserted, and we were just checking for correct placement of the nasogastric feeding tube. So that's simply a feeding tube that goes up through the nose, into the esophagus, and into the stomach, and helps patients who are unable to feed themselves. And so I'd ordered the x-rays. My registrar was then responsible for reviewing the x-rays later. And so she checked the x-ray for the patient, and as you can see, the nasogastric tube is going down the midline and looks as though it's nicely settling in the stomach. And so the registrar gave the instruction to the nurse to commence the feed. There was only one problem. This was an x-ray from that patient, but it was from 5 days ago. It was from the last time the nasogastric tube was inserted. Unfortunately, this was the x-ray from that morning. And in this case, you can see the nasogastric tube is going into the left main bronchus and into the left lower lobe of the lung. And so when that feed started, all that liquid feed went straight into the patient's lung, leading to the patient to go into acute respiratory distress, and was later transferred to a specialist respiratory center. A patient who was already severely ill with a severe bacterial infection, and this latest insult had pushed it even further. So much went wrong that day. This is what we call, those who work in the clinical profession, a never event. It should never happen, but it does, and it still happens today. Human factors were involved. A lot of things went wrong. And the technology system, it wasn't at fault, but it didn't help my registrar or any of the clinicians to inform them. And actually, the x-ray they were looking at was 5 days old, and there was a more recent one still to come. It didn't help her to do the right thing and stop her from doing the wrong thing. And so this was my first experience in terms of my first major patient safety incident as a clinician, and it stayed with me throughout my work as I moved into the health tech sector and moved into digital health, and really brings me to this point, which is, hopefully we all agree, safety is the foundation of healthcare. It's the first and most important lesson you're taught as a clinician or as a healthcare professional, and again, it's been something that I've led with throughout my work in digital health. However, unsafe care still among the leading causes of death worldwide. How is that possible? How many digital health companies are leading with safety, are thinking about safety on a day-to-day basis? I ask them, I wonder. And so as we know, we've talked, we're closing the conference now, but we've talked over the last 2 days about the potential for digital health, for different technologies to improve patient care, whether that's AI and machine learning, blockchain, metaverse, you name it. And absolutely, you're preaching the converted. I'm a technologist, and I see the potential. Huge potential. We're already seeing it to improve patient care and improve patient safety. However, these same systems and solutions, if not designed, developed, implemented, and operated with safety at the core, can introduce clinical risk leading to patient harm. This is another example. This hit the papers in the UK back in 2016, and just shows a very simple risk calculator that is used commonly by general practitioners pretty much every day to calculate the likelihood of a patient suffering a stroke or heart attack in the next 10 years. This was incorrectly integrated and configured in a GP health IT system, and it had gone unnoticed for multiple years. As a result, leading to hundreds of thousands of patients being impacted and potentially harmed, i.e. patients received a therapy, a statin in this case, when they shouldn't have, or patients who should have received a therapy did not. And again, this wasn't just a one-off. This actually happened 3 separate occasions, this same risk calculator. Simple, massive impact if it goes wrong. Imagine when we're talking about AI, machine learning, and other technologies, about the potential of those systems causing patient harm. And so in the UK, in the NHS, we have 2 NHS clinical safety standards that are mandated by law as part of the Health and Social Care Act, DCB 129 and DCB 160. These essentially set out for any digital health or health IT software that interfaces with the NHS, that has an impact on patients. As a company, as an organization, if you're a developer or an implementer of the technology, you have to comply with these standards. And again, it's part of law, and they cover the whole range of health IT, digital health software, including software as medical devices. And they're part of what's called our DTAC framework, which is the Digital Technology Assessment Criteria, essentially the baseline criteria for entry into health and social care. So really important and really useful, actually, for those who are outside of the NHS. This is a great standard and set of documents that you can take and just localize and apply to any country, because it really sets out a really effective way of doing this, of really effective clinical risk management. Throughout the life cycle of a health IT digital health solution, how do you assess and mitigate risk? These 3 steps: risk analysis, what could go wrong; risk evaluation, how serious could it be and how likely is it to occur; and then most importantly, risk control. What can we do about it? What design controls, business process controls, other technical and other controls that we can put in place to reduce risk as much as possible. And as a clinical safety lead, I often get asked, is the system safe? Can you sign it off as safe? I said, it's not about safe versus unsafe. It's very hard for me to say, or anyone to say, a digital health solution is safe, because inherently there will always be some level of risk. But what I can say, at least if we followed the correct process, is we have reduced risk as far as possible to a level that is tolerable or acceptable, right? And where that is satisfactory to proceed in terms of allowing it to go live. And again, can be a very difficult decision when you're working in a fast-paced environment that is digital health, where we're pushing out releases on a bi-weekly basis, and design and development teams don't want to be slowed down. This can be seen as a barrier to getting functionality out the door, and it shouldn't be. And look, there are loads of other standards that you can look at which are relevant to the clinical risk space, ISO standards, the EU medical device regulation, which try to incorporate clinical risk. And again, recommend you to take this and take the best practices from these standards and apply it to your work in digital health. And look, we're not inventing this in healthcare. We're learning from other industries. I've had the unique opportunity to work with our Ministry of Defense team in IBM, who are responsible for working with the RAF, and we set up the what's called the Guardian system, which is the aerial threat detection system that the MOD uses to detect aerial threats in the sky. And so they have a safety engineer, a safety officer, a safety management system, and I'm stealing the best ideas from what they do in the Ministry of Defense and trying to take that and apply it to healthcare and digital health. And also another thing that I'm working hard on is, a lot of this requires cultural change. And for a lot of individuals who I work with, designers, developers, and others, this concept of clinical safety is still fairly new. And so I do a lot of work with our design team so that we are designing for safety. So that when we lead and when we take a client engagement, whatever it may be, a proof of concept, a pilot, the first iteration, that we are taking this concept of designing for safety and baking it into the process of design and development, rather than just sprinkling it on top at the end and saying, oh, I did a checklist, and yes, I've signed some clinical safety case reports. We need to lead with safety, and we need to design for safety to reduce risk to patients. And this has led to what I would say, and you'll hear this term more and more, I believe, the rise of what's called the clinical safety officer. How many people have heard this term? Just a quick raise of hands. Clinical safety officer. Great, at least half. And so I see this becoming a more and more prominent role for clinicians in digital health to lead and really lead that clinical risk approach in the digital health and health IT space. I've learned a huge amount being a CSO myself, and it's something I think is a great also entry point for clinicians who are looking to get into health tech to really get hands-on and do something really important. And so with that, I wanted just to emphasize that we should be leading with safety in digital health. It's something all our teams should talk about, and we should use it, and the company should use it as a differentiator. your safety profile and your approach to safety can be a massive differentiator and competitive advantage for you in the space. And finally, I just want to highlight just a personal campaign I'm running at the moment. I don't usually have a mustache. This is Movember, and I would love it if you could support my campaign to support men's mental health and suicide prevention. Thank you, and have a really phenomenal evening.